Esther, host of Once Upon a Crime. In this video, we delve into the extraordinary lives of Harry Tyson Moore and his wife Harriet, two unsung heroes of the civil rights movement, whose profound courage paved the way for justice. Often considered the starting point for the movement in 1954, with the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, many pivotal moments followed. Yet the fight against racial injustice began long before. Set against the backdrop of rising tensions in the 1930s, witness how this courageous couple risked everything to advocate for African American rights. Tragically, their dedication to equality made them targets, culminating in a cowardly act of violence on Christmas Day 1951, when their home was bombed by the KKK. Join me in discovering the details of this tragic true crime story from history and learning how it resonated within the civil rights movement, laying the groundwork for the continued fight against racial injustice. If you'd like more compelling true crime stories from history like this one, follow us on your favorite podcast app or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click on the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified whenever we drop a new video. This is the story of Harry and Harriet Moore and the KKK Christmas Day bombing. This episode of Once Upon a Crime is sponsored by BetterHelp. I am so stoked because I wrapped up all my deadline work for the podcast. That means up until New Year's, I'll be in my comfy clothes, wrapped up in my cozy blanket, on the couch watching cheesy holiday movies and true crime documentaries. Add a warm beverage or a glass of wine, and I'm all set through the cold winter month of December. How do you spell comfort? Therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. BetterHelp makes it simple and convenient to get the support you need through online therapy. Therapy has helped me to overcome the occasional life challenges that everyone faces. I look forward to speaking with my therapist to provide me with new insights and give me the tools I need to move forward with both my personal and professional goals. I love the convenience BetterHelp offers. It's entirely online, so you don't have to venture out into the cold or drive through bad weather to meet with your therapist. You can do it from the comfort of your own home on your schedule. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to be matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/once today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/once. Water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. Does it feel that way when you're out of bottled water? We've learned that clean water is so important for our health. But unfortunately, according to extensive research by the Environmental Working Group, virtually every home in America has harmful contaminants in its tap water. Having clean, safe water is one more thing we'd rather not have to worry about. But if you're like me, you probably don't trust your tap water. That's why I'm pleased to introduce you to our new sponsor, AquaTrue. AquaTrue purifiers use a 4-stage reverse osmosis purification process. What's great about AquaTrue is that their countertop purifiers work with no installation or plumbing required. They have water purifiers to fit every type of home, from installation-free countertop purifiers to higher capacity under-sink options. You can choose what best fits your needs. These filters are affordable and long-lasting. No changing filters every 2 to 3 months. AquaTrue filters last from 6 months to 2 years. And just one set of filters from their classic purifier makes the equivalent of 4,500 bottles of water. That's less than 3 cents a bottle. You'll save money and the environmental impact of plastic bottles at the same time. What's not to love? AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and even makes a great gift. Today, my listeners receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com, that's AQUATRU.com, and enter code ONCE at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use promo code ONCE. aquatrue.com, promo code ONCE. Are you looking for a gift that really enhances your recipient's life? Give the gift of language to a friend, family member, or loved one, and open up their world to new experiences and possibilities. A lifetime membership to Rosetta Stone is the gift that truly keeps on giving. For a limited time, our listeners can give the gift of language for 50% off all 25 languages for a lifetime, and no shipping fees. Rosetta Stone has made it so much easier than it used to be for me to brush up on languages I've encountered in my travels. Whether you want to learn the language of your ancestors or to enhance your travel experiences, Rosetta Stone is the immersive way to pick up a new language, and it's designed for long-term retention. Do you want to sound more fluent? Rosetta Stone's built-in True Accent gives you feedback on your pronunciation as well. Plus, with Rosetta Stone, learning a new language or building on your current skills is convenient. You can learn on the go with the mobile app or at your desktop on your schedule. Their lifetime membership has all 25 languages: Spanish, French, Italian, German, Korean, Dutch, Chinese, and so many more. And right now, you'll get access to all 25 languages for 50% off their lifetime membership with our exclusive discount. Don't put off learning that language. There's no better time than right now to get started. Today, Once Upon a Crime listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. Visit rosettastone.com/once. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 50% off at rosettastone.com/once today for yourself or as a gift that keeps giving. It was December 25th, 1951, and Christmas Day was turning to Christmas night in the Moore household, but they had yet to open their gifts. Their 21-year-old daughter, Evangeline, was on a train from her home in Washington, D.C., traveling to Mims, Florida, to join her parents for the holiday, but would not arrive until the next day. Harry and Harriet Moore planned a delayed Christmas celebration with their daughters, Evangeline and Annie, called Peaches, and the girls' grandmother. Christmas Day also happened to be another auspicious occasion, their 25th wedding anniversary. Harry and Harriet were devoted to one another and had been inseparable ever since they met at a party in 1925. They'd married the following year on Christmas Day. They'd spent the day of this, their silver anniversary, quietly celebrating together. Their daughter Peaches was already in her back bedroom sleeping when the couple headed to bed around 10 p.m. Around 20 minutes later, a massive explosion detonated under the floorboards of their bedroom. The blast was so powerful, it ripped open the room where they were sleeping all the way to the front porch. A bomb made of dynamite had been placed under the house. The boom could be heard several miles away. Neighbors ran from their homes and saw the destruction. Peaches emerged from the back of the house, disoriented but unscathed. Her grandmother Rose arrived soon after. Amazingly, both Harry and Harriet, though gravely injured, were still alive. However, in 1951 in Florida, racism was still so prevalent against African Americans that Peaches and her grandmother knew an ambulance would not arrive to assist Harry and Harriet, nor would several hospitals in the area admit Black patients. A relative with a vehicle was called to help. They loaded the severely injured couple into the car and drove them 30 miles away to a Sanford, Florida hospital. Harry Moore died soon after arriving. Harriet, though in critical condition, was still alive. She was rushed into the emergency room. When their youngest daughter Evangeline's train arrived, she was told the devastating news. 46-year-old Harry T. Moore's funeral was held on New Year's Day. Going against the advice of her doctors, Harriet insisted on attending to see her husband laid to rest. 2 days later, she would also succumb to her injuries. She had a tear in her stomach, and her intestines had collapsed from the force of the bomb that threw her. Before she died, Harriet Moore expressed her wish to join her beloved husband in death. "There isn't much left to fight for," she told a reporter who interviewed her at her hospital bedside. "My home is wrecked. My children are grown up. They don't need me. Others can carry on." Without Harry, Harriet did not want to go on. They'd lived, loved, and fought injustice together. Their quiet determination had put them in the crosshairs of powerful and dangerous enemies. The FBI began their investigation into the Christmas Day bombing, calling it a civil rights investigation. They focused on local Ku Klux Klan members who'd been responsible for a rash of racially motivated bombings in 1951. There were so many that year, the Moores were victims of the 12th bombing, that the press dubbed them collectively the Florida Terror. The FBI conducted a thorough investigation of the bombing, interviewing over 1,000 witnesses conducting telephone surveillance, and submitting evidence found at the scene for laboratory analysis. However, witness cooperation was difficult, as many feared retaliation by Klan members. In addition, the Black community, understandably, had a long-standing distrust of law enforcement and was unwilling to talk. Still, agents had suspects they believed were directly tied to the bombing of the Moores' home. An FBI informant reported that about a year earlier, a Klansman named Earl J. Brooklyn had shown other members a floor plan of the residence. Another Klansman, Tillman H. Belvin, was also named as a suspect. Both Brooklyn and Belvin had been expelled from their KKK chapter for being, quote, renegades who were too violent. In June 1953, a federal grand jury returned an indictment against the former Klan members. However, it was dismissed by the courts in January 1954. A Florida court ruled that the crime fell outside the federal government's jurisdiction. The FBI closed its investigation in 1955. By that time, both suspects had died from natural causes. Strangely, Earl Brooklyn died on Christmas Day 1952, 1 year to the day of the bombing. But how had Harry and Harriet Moore become the target of the KKK? I'll take you through their story after a short break.
Here at the Mortal Musings podcast, Neil and I want to wish all the listeners of Once Upon a Crime a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. While you wait for the next fantastic episode of Once Upon a Crime, why not head over to Mortal Musings podcast and give us a listen?
Yeah, if you're feeling all festive and want to give the gift of listenership, of course, me and Megan will very graciously accept.
Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Merry Christmas, everybody!
Season's greetings, Once Upon a Crime listeners. It's your boy Leroy here, wishing you a safe and happy holiday. Don't be like me and drink too much eggnog. It's a bad scene, man. And I know the holiday season can be hectic, but if you have a little extra time and want to laugh, check out my podcast. Excuse me? That's illegal. I'd really appreciate it. I need it so bad. Okay, but that's enough shameless self-promotion. Esther, you know you're my favorite podcaster and a great friend, so I also want to wish you a Merry Christmas. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. Feliz Navidad, girl. Peace.
Harry Tyson Moore was born in 1905 in Houston, Florida, to Rosalia and Johnny Moore. He was their only child. When Harry was 9 years old, his father died. Rosalia struggled to provide for her son alone. She ran a small store and also worked in the fields at harvest time to bring in extra money. In 1916, when he was 11, his mother sent him to live with his aunts, Jessie, Adriana, and Maisie Tyson, in Jacksonville, Florida. All three were educated professionals. 2 were teachers and 1 was a nurse. The La Villa neighborhood of Jacksonville was a thriving African-American community at that time. Known as the Harlem of the South, it was a hub for Black-owned businesses, culture, and civic organizations. Harry's mother, Rosalia, hoped her son would have opportunities in Jacksonville for a good education and later a career. However, Florida had remained a stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan since the early 1900s. The organization was founded in Tennessee in 1866 by former Confederate soldiers. It began as a fraternal social club, but soon morphed into a white supremacist hate group. The group disbanded in 1869 to avoid government sanctions. It was brought back in 1915 when Dr. William J. Simmons led a cross-burning ceremony in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Klan members expressed anti-Black, anti-Jewish, and anti-Catholic views, and built the organization to its largest membership. By 1925, the KKK numbered over 3 million members. In the years leading up to the Depression and afterward, membership dwindled to only a few 100,000. However, the largest area of Klan activity remained in Florida. An estimated 300,000 members were mainly located in Jacksonville, Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. Harry Moore matured into a thoughtful and intelligent young man. After graduating high school, he attended Florida Memorial College. He was nicknamed Doc by his classmates because of his intelligence and the fact that he was always professionally dressed in a suit jacket and tie. Harry entered the field of education after graduating with his degree. In 1925, he moved to Cocoa, Florida in Brevard County. He began his career as a fourth-grade teacher at Cocoa Junior High School, the only Black elementary school in the county. That year, he met Harriet Vida Sims, a former schoolteacher working as a life insurance salesperson. She was 3 years his senior, and Harry was immediately drawn to her beauty and intelligence. A year earlier, Harriet had graduated from the Jacksonville Cookman Institute, later rechristened Bethune-Cookman College. She'd worked as an elementary school teacher in several schools before selling insurance. Harry and Harriet married the following Christmas and moved to Mims, Florida. They built a house on a plot of land adjacent to Harriet's parents' home. In 1928, their daughter Annie Rosalia, nicknamed Peaches, was born. 2 years later, she was joined by a baby sister, Juanita Evangeline. Harriet returned to teaching after the birth of her first child. Harry had been promoted to principal of the Titusville Colored School. He also taught 9th grade and supervised a staff of 6 teachers. Harry, who as a young boy grew up surrounded by family and community members who celebrated Black culture and achievement, was passionate about inspiring his students in these areas. He would bring materials to class to educate his students about Black history. He also provided civics lessons, informing his students about their voting rights and encouraging them to become politically active. In 1934, Harry founded the first chapter of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, in Brevard County. In 1937, the organization sued to challenge the discrepancy between Black and white teachers' salaries. They were represented in court by NAACP attorney Thurgood Marshall, who would later become a justice of the United States Supreme Court. Although they lost their legal battle, it led to a dozen other federal lawsuits in the state, eventually leading to the equalization of salaries for Black employees. Moore threw himself into his work with the NAACP and became the organization's first paid executive secretary. There was a lot of work to be done, and Harry Moore didn't back away from a challenge, no matter how dangerous it became. He organized the Florida State Conference of the NAACP in 1941. The Florida NAACP grew to over 10,000 members and 63 branches during his tenure. Moore wrote letters to the governor and printed and distributed flyers protesting unequal pay, segregated schools, and especially the barriers African Americans faced in accessing their right to vote. In 1870, the right to vote was granted to all men with the passage of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution. However, voting rights were still being denied by some state constitutions and laws. Barriers like poll taxes, literacy tests, and voter intimidation were still employed to keep Blacks from the polls. It wasn't until 1965, when President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into federal law, prohibiting discriminatory voting practices, that Blacks would be legally guaranteed this fundamental right. But this was still 2 decades in the future. In the state of Florida in 1944, Blacks were still systematically excluded from primaries and general elections. That year, Thurgood Marshall successfully argued in front of the Supreme Court that an all-white Democratic Party primary was unconstitutional. On the tail of this significant victory, Harry Moore formed the Progressive Voters League to increase African American participation in the Democratic Party. Through the League's efforts, over 100,000 Black voters were registered in the Florida Democratic Party. Essentially unchallenged, Ku Klux Klan-backed candidates in the state of Florida were often quickly voted into their positions. Many Klan members themselves held political offices. Harry Moore and the Progressive Voters League directly challenged the Klan's political power in Florida. On election night, November 2, 1948, the Florida Klan marched through African American communities from Lake County to Wildwood to intimidate Black voters and to show support for presidential candidate Strom Thurmond, who'd come out strongly against civil rights legislation. Thurmond won only 3% of the popular vote, with Harry Truman winning 49% and Thomas Dewey 45%. Formerly the governor of South Carolina, Thurmond became the longest-serving U.S. senator in history, holding the office from 1954 to 2003 in that state. Between 1949 and 1951, Harry Moore led a campaign protesting the wrongful conviction of 3 Black men who were sentenced to prison after being accused of raping a white woman. This high-profile case, known as the Groveland 4 incident, occurred on July 16, 1949 in Groveland, Florida. 4 Black men between the ages of 16 and 22 were accused of an attack on a young couple whose car stalled on a Lake County road. Willie Paget said the men had offered to help them, but then attacked him and raped his 17-year-old wife, Norma. Paget reported the incident to Sheriff Willis McCall. Police quickly identified 4 men as suspects: Ernest Thomas, 26, Charles Greenlee, 16, Samuel Shepard and Walter Irvin, both 22. Irvin and Shepard, both World War II vets, were arrested shortly after the attack. The 2 men were picked up in a patrol car and driven to a secluded spot. Officers began beating them and demanding they confess. There was no evidence that either man had committed the crime. They were taken to the jailhouse basement, where they were further interrogated and then cuffed to overhead pipes. The men were severely beaten. Meanwhile, already named by police as a suspect in the rape, a mob burned Shepard's house down, along with 2 others in his neighborhood. National Guard officers were called to quell the riot. 16-year-old Charles Greenlee had just arrived in Groveland to meet his friend Ernest Thomas to look for work. Greenlee was waiting for his friend at the train station when police picked him up as a suspect. The teen was interrogated and brutally beaten by officers who coerced a confession out of him. He was also forced to provide the name of his friend, Ernest Thomas. Thomas, learning that the police were looking to arrest him as the 4th suspect, fled the county. Sheriff McCall enlisted over 1,000 armed men to track him down. He was discovered 200 miles away in Madison County. After being chased through swampland, Thomas was shot by the posse over 400 times. Sheriff McCall, who was at the scene, claimed that Thomas had drawn a weapon on the officers. An inquest into Thomas's death was held. A jury determined that his death was a justifiable homicide. The 3 remaining suspects were indicted for rape. Shepard and Greenlee were interviewed by FBI investigators separately. Both said they'd been forced to confess to stop the beatings by police. Irvin never confessed and maintained his innocence. The NAACP aided in their defense and was instrumental in convincing the FBI to investigate. The FBI concluded that 2 sheriff's deputies had violated the men's civil rights and urged the U.S. attorney to prosecute, but the grand jury declined to return indictments against them. All 3 men were found guilty by an all-white jury. Shepard and Irvin were sentenced to death, while the minor, Greenlee, was sentenced to life in prison. After their convictions, the NAACP continued the fight to exonerate the men. In 1951, Marshall appealed their case to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court overturned the convictions of the 2 men sentenced to death. Greenlee had not appealed his life sentence, and sent the case back to the lower court to be retried. Shepard and Irvin were transported from prison back to Lake County, where they were to be jailed pending their retrial. They were being escorted by Sheriff Willis McCall when he pulled his car over down a dirt road, took the 2 prisoners who were cuffed together out of the car, and shot each of them 3 times. McCall later claimed that he'd pulled the squad car over due to a flat tire. He stated that the men had asked to get out of the vehicle to relieve themselves, but once outside of the car, they attacked him. He'd drawn his weapon to defend himself, the sheriff said. Shepard was killed instantly, but Irvin survived by playing dead. An ambulance arrived, and discovering he was still alive, transported him to the hospital. The following day, Irvin told FBI agents and a reporter that McCall had shot him and Shepard in cold blood after staging the scene to make it look like an escape attempt. But in 1951, the all-white coroner's jury, many of whom were friends of the sheriff, found Shepard's death to be justified and cleared McCall of any wrongdoing. Learning of this gross injustice, Harry T. Moore, representing the Florida NAACP, demanded the sheriff be indicted for murder and called for the governor to suspend him from office. People described Harry T. Moore as quiet and soft-spoken, but he could become quite assertive when called to help right an injustice. He would not back down from a fight, even in the face of danger. His mother became worried that her son would be killed. "I tried to get him to quit the NAACP," Rosalia Moore told a reporter after his death. But he'd told his mother he intended to fight for reform. Quote, "Every advancement comes by way of sacrifice," Moore told her. "And if I sacrifice my life or health, I still think it is my duty for my race." End quote. He kept on going, Rosalia says proudly, because he knew it was bigger than him. 6 weeks after calling for the sheriff's removal, Moore was killed when a stick of dynamite exploded under his house while he was lying in bed.
Hey Esther, it's your friend Laura from the Fall Line, here to wish your listeners Merry Christmas and the happiest of holidays.
Hey, it's Justin from the Generation Y. We wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Whether you're spending time with family or loved ones, we hope it's a great one.
Happy Holidays from Danny After Dark. Danny After Dark is a true crime YouTube channel that does 2 live shows a week. One show will cover a solved case or a book review. The second show is a bit more interactive, the weekly True Crime and Chill, where we hang out and chat about the week's current true crime news.
Since the 1951 Christmas Day bombing, 3 investigations have been conducted to determine who was responsible for Harry and Harriet Moore's murders. The FBI investigation that was conducted right after the bombing was closed in 1955, as I detailed earlier in this episode. In essence, the federal case was thwarted by the state of Florida's courts. In 1978, the NAACP requested the murder case be reopened. The state's Attorney General's office and the Brevard County Sheriff's Department conducted the investigation. A witness, Edward Lee Spivey, came forward, stating that he knew who planted the bomb. Spivey, a former high-ranking member of the KKK, was dying of terminal cancer and wanted to clear his conscience. In 1952, Spivey said, his friend and fellow KKK member Joseph Cox confessed to him that he'd planted the bomb after he was offered $5,000. He needed the money to pay off his mortgage, he allegedly told Spivey. Cox was nervous because the FBI was investigating the bombing, and he was afraid they'd track the payment back to him. Soon after this confession, Spivey claims Cox asked to borrow his shotgun. That same day, March 30th, 1952, Cox used the gun to kill himself. It was just one day after the FBI's second interview with him. Cox had not told him specifically who had offered him money to set the bomb. He only knew it was someone associated with the Klan. However, he stressed to investigators that it was not a Klan-sanctioned bombing. Douglas Cheshire, the state attorney general, was committed to presenting this new information to a grand jury. However, after he lost his re-election bid, the case was closed. The case was once again resurrected in 1991 after other so-called confessions came to light. These confessions, one supposedly told to a woman by her husband, who was a former Klan member, and another by a member who'd confessed in 1978 and then recanted, were investigated but were deemed not credible. Sheriff McCall was also investigated as possibly involved in the bombing. However, no compelling evidence was ever presented naming him as a suspect. In 2008, the FBI reviewed the previous investigations and identified 10 former members of the Central Florida KKK who they believed might have pertinent information about the bombing. 8 were confirmed to be dead, and 2 could not be located. The review did not produce any new leads and included that the most probable suspects initially investigated in 1951, Brooklyn, Belvin, Cox, and Spivey, had all since died. The FBI report also stated that the federal statute of limitations for the bombing had expired. Even if a living suspect were identified, it would have been difficult for the Department of Justice to prosecute. The FBI officially closed the case in 2011, and it technically remains unsolved. The Moore's daughters worked to keep their parents' legacy alive, as well as continued to seek justice for their murders. My whole life came to an end that day, Evangeline Moore says about Christmas Day in 1951. Everything that came after that was influenced by the deaths of my parents in that horrible, horrible incident. I think God has left me here all these years to get justice for my dad and my mom, she continues. The whole course of my family's history changed when they killed my parents. I won't stop until somebody is held accountable. That explosion took everything from me. I don't think I've felt truly safe ever in my life since it happened. Evangeline stated this in 2011 when being interviewed about the government's official closing of their investigation. Annie Peaches Moore, who survived the bombing that took her parents' lives, died at the age of 44 due to complications of asthma. She believed that her compromised lungs were a result of the smoke she inhaled from the bombing. In 1952, Harry T. Moore was posthumously awarded the Springham Medal for Outstanding Achievement by the NAACP. In the years since the Moore's deaths, Brevard County has dedicated a park, a justice center, a highway, and a post office to Harry and Harriet. In 2004, the Moore Memorial Park and Cultural Center was opened to honor the couple's legacy. The complex is located at 2180 Freedom Avenue in Mims, Florida, and includes a museum and a replica of their home. It is located on the original property site where the house stood. The Brevard County Courthouse in Viera, Florida, was renamed the Harry and Harriet Moore Justice Center in their honor in 2013. In 2024, a children's book titled Freedom Never Dies, The Story of Harry T. and Harriet Moore, written and illustrated by James Edward Burks, was published. It details the Moores' legacy, including their fight for equal voting rights and equitable pay for African American teachers. You can find it on Amazon. I've included a link in the show notes. That will do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime. That will also wrap up our episodes for 2024. We'll be on a break for the holidays and will return with a new series on January 13th. In the meantime, we have a back catalog of true crime podcast episodes dating back to 2016. Check out all the series and episodes and listen on your favorite podcast app or on our website, truecrimepodcast.com. We also have a YouTube channel where you can watch amazing documentary-style videos of many of our episodes. You can also join us live on YouTube this Friday, December 20th, for our holiday PJ party. We'll be joined by special guests to discuss true crime and have some holiday fun. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified when we go live. You can also watch the replay afterward. Finally, if you're looking for more holiday-themed true crime stories, I've created a Spotify playlist with episodes from our past seasons, all centered around holiday crimes. Check out all of the links in the show notes. I've repeatedly been asked by listeners if I have an Amazon wish list. Well, I finally created one. If you'd like to send a gift, click on that link in the show notes. You'll find some wished-for true crime books, of course, items I frequently need restocked here in the podcast studio, as well as doggy treats for Benji, Riley, and Bentley, my sidekicks and companions during the long hours I spend creating episodes for our listeners. Who are good boys? They are, and they insisted I add treats for them as well. Thanks to all of you for coming back each week to hear my stories, subscribing and following the podcast on all our platforms and channels, and as always, for being awesome. I wish you all a wonderful, safe, and peaceful holiday season. Once Upon a Crime is written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez-Ledlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia, and Emma Battaglia provided research for this episode. Until next time, be good to one another.